Hello, everybody, and welcome to Apre Midi. And I'm really, really pleased to introduce Claire Atkinson, who is not an American.
I'm a citizen. I'm British born, but I'm an American citizen.
Okay. I have been corrected. She has written about the global media business on both sides of the Atlantic. Mm-hmm. She was previously on Insider's business desk and came from NBC News, where she was senior media editor reporting for NBCnews.com. Nightly News, MSNBC, NBC News Now. It's a lot of N's.
Okay. That's a lot of platforms.
She's also a regular guest on CNBC and appeared on CNN's Reliable Sources. Wish I had a nickel for every N in this. Claire travels the world to keep you ahead of what's happening in media, tech, and marketing. She's also the author of a new upcoming bio on Rupert Murdoch. That's why we can't record it, okay? She is based in France, but frequently in London and New York. And I welcome Claire Atkinson. Thank you very, very much.
Well, I just want to start by saying that I read Adrian's writing every single week. And thank you for having me here. When it hits my inbox, no matter how busy I am, I open it and I read it, and it's always interesting and always compelling. So
thank you.
Round of applause for Adrian, her writing.
Thank you.
So I am going to make this interactive. I'm going to be calling on you as well as talking to you because I want to learn. This is my chance to learn what you think about books, about biographies, about politics, about Rupert. And so please be prepared to chat to me as well. I am coming here today after a week of reporting on the Cannes Film Festival. I thought I would share a couple of tips for you about what to look out for as the movies get made and get bought and head to, I think, the Venice Film Festival is next, and then San Sebastian. So one movie that caught my eye, I didn't go and see anything because I was reporting, but I read the reviews, is a movie by a Ukrainian director called Two Prosecutors. And the story is a man who's been accused of something that he didn't do. And a young lawyer tries to defend him in Stalin's Russia. And he bumps up against lies and corruption and authoritarianism. And so what I saw was that was kind of a theme of Cannes this year, is that a lot of movies...
Why?
Well, I think, there's a bit of a time lag with movies. It takes many years to kind of get the money, find the scripts, put the teams together. But exactly as Adrian said, authoritarianism is something that is on our minds, perhaps because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the election of various new presidents and prime ministers around the world. I don't want to get arrested on the streets. You know who I'm talking about. And so, that was kind of an interesting theme. Another movie I wanted to mention to you was The Secret Agent, which stars Wagner Moura, who, I don't know if anybody saw Narcos on Netflix. He was the guy who played Pablo Escobar, and he returns to Brazil, and he's there to sort of connect with his son, and it's 1977, and what he's expecting is a small town, and what he finds is a dictatorship, and this is the story of him trying to deal with that. So, I tell you all of this because, the political climate is a big talking point for everybody right now. Some of the folks that I interviewed for my coverage during Cannes, I talked about tariffs and taxes and whether we should have film support for American movies. And the feedback was, we just want to wait and see on the taxes. We just want to, we'll tell you when we know more. And so what you see is kind of a reluctance to talk about Trump, to talk about controversial topics. And, that kind of leads me to feel like we're in a very different place in America where maybe the freedom of speech isn't as free as it used to be. And so, as a journalist who's been covering the communications space for 30 years, it's amazing how the communications has changed, and who controls the media, who controls the message, who controls what you say and think and what people share is a topic worth debating. So I'd like to ask all of you, who's reading books? Who, put your hand up if you like to read books. Okay, it looks like you wouldn't be here if you were not readers. Tell me who is into biographies. Who here reads biographies? 1, 2, okay, maybe like half the room. Who can tell me why they like biographies or what makes a good biography? Anybody? Anybody want to talk about why they like, sir?
I like the insights.
Yeah.
I like to know who this person is and really try to get an idea of how they think. And obviously they're famous to some extent because they have a biography about them.
Yes.
But also kind of why and I want to know the whys behind the general surface story.
Yeah.
Claire, since Rod's not mic'd up, you may have to repeat
what he
said.
Okay. So you want to know the why of the person, why they make decisions, who they are. I mean, I feel like the best biographies put you in the room. They put you in the meetings. They put you at home with the person, and you get to learn not just about the public face, but about all of the details of their personal lives, their career, how they got to the top, what makes them who they are. And I think that's what I'm aiming for with my book. It's my first biography. But the aim is to give you a portrait of Rupert Murdoch. I don't know if anyone here has watched Succession on HBO.
Oh yes.
That is supposedly modeled on, in part, on Rupert Murdoch and his family. And so when I watched it, I think it's a great drama. And I thought to myself, it does portray Rupert as kind of or Logan Roy as a very kind of cardboard person. And to me, I've worked for Rupert Murdoch for a long time. And so I wanted everybody to know the whole story. Who here would like to write a book or feels they have a book in them? Anybody? Adrian? Absolutely. Adrian's got one. Yes. Sarah at the back. Can you tell me about whether you've started writing at all? Yeah. Or were you just ordering a drink? You've written a few chapters. Yeah? Yeah? That's great. Anybody else interested in writing a book?
If we were
Katie?
in Paris, half this room would raise their hand.
Yes.
Yeah. No, seriously.
Yeah. So that's just 2 people. 3 people. I feel like everybody has a book in them. Everybody's life stories are really interesting. And I would encourage everybody to put it down in some way, whether it is telling your family your life story or recording it for yourself into your phone,
a journal.
Or a journal. But I think it's interesting family history. We all want to pass on the lives that we've led to people that come after us. And so I write daily. I am halfway through my book right now, so it's not going to be out for another year. This is my first talk about it, so I'm practicing what will be a lot of conversations about Rupert once my book is out. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the process of writing a book, because let me tell you, it is not easy. I write as a journalist every day. I am working that nerve frequently. But writing news and writing a narrative are very, very different things. What you're doing when you're writing news is gathering facts and synthesizing and analyzing the information that you've got and making it easy for people to understand. What you do when you write a book is something very different. You're sitting there and you have to hold the hand of the reader and take them around the garden and tell them a story. And so this is something I'm learning. I have an editor at the publishing house. I've hired my own editor. And so it's a very solitary, lonely experience as a reporter. You send something along and you get instant feedback from people about whether it's good or not. when you write a book, you are writing into the void, and you don't know whether it's good or if you're on the right track or you've gone down a weird rabbit hole. But what you're trying to do is to tell people what you think. And that's quite a difficult thing for reporters to do because you're out there with your own story. So, I just want to share some of these like difficulties. You read these books from people and, I'm sure most people have no idea of what goes into the process. I have read tons of books. I have watched tons of YouTube clips. I have interviewed hundreds of people, and then you have to catalog those interviews and remember what they said to you. But I want it to be as fulsome a picture as I possibly can. And so luckily I've been a media journalist for 30 years now, so I can pretty much pick up the phone to anybody in the business and be like, can you tell me again how Fox News got started? Or, can you tell me again, like, why Rupert decided to launch Fox Network? And I can pretty much get a lot of people on the phone. So I think that's like a unique selling point of me as a reporter, that I'm somebody that's covered the business for a long, long time. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I started on a local newspaper. I called the cops, the fire, the ambulance, the churches. And I began really doing civics. And being a local newspaper reporter helps you understand what's going on in your neighborhood. Like who's dying, who's being arrested. You really learn everything. And you learn how the court system works. You learn about inquests. And I think that is, the best training. And what we're seeing in the media right now is pretty much anybody can write, anybody can take a photo, anybody can interview somebody. And, we're kind of losing the idea of what journalism is, because journalism is something that I was trained for. I learned how to sort fact from fiction. I learned that you don't write without a second source and ideally a third source. And so when people take shots at the media, I think they're talking about a big, big group of people, including social media, that they feel either doesn't represent what they think, or, they feel is unprofessional. We have a blending of opinion and news. And so there's a lot of things going on with the news business right now that is frustrating a lot of people. So I started on the local newspaper, learned the trade, went to London, and I began working on international trade magazines about the topic of program sales. So this is, let me think about the date here. We're talking about the early 90s, just after the Berlin Wall came down. And if you were in Eastern Europe, what you got to watch on TV was the ballet and state news. You didn't really get anything more than that. But what happened in that period of time was a sudden opening up after Gorbachev of the media systems, and they went and started buying Dallas and Dynasty and telenovelas, and the populations of these closed off countries suddenly started to see American television and BBC and things like that. And I got to write on publications. I went to Russia, I went to Hungary, I went to Romania, I went to Czech Republic, a lot of these places where commercial TV was beginning for the first time. And so I got to travel around the world, and I got to listen to American people who were selling TV shows talk about their world. And so I went to events in Las Vegas that were about syndication and TV sales and trading of television. It was like the most fantastic job anybody could have. I got to travel, learn about TV, learn about the media business on a global basis. I wasn't just learning about the UK's media system. I was seeing what was happening in Latin America, in Russia, everywhere, and how it was changing. And at that time, Rupert is interested in buying, interested in expanding his assets in all of these different places beyond the newspaper business. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So I moved from, I look at what's happening in America and I think if you want to know about this business, you need to be in New York, the capital of ambition, the place where media is born, the place where magazines, publishing houses are concentrated. So I left London, came to New York, worked on a bunch of trade magazines, and then I went to work for Rupert at the New York Post, which I don't know if anybody here knows the New York Post. One, two, anybody else? Three, four. It's the world's loudest, most fiercest tabloid newspaper. And I worked on the media desk. My job was to write about Rupert's own business, which was no easy task. But it was a fascinating role. I got to go to the Oscars and write columns about the Oscars. I got to go to Sundance. I went to film festivals all over the world. I went to Sun Valley, which I don't know if anybody knows the Allen and Company's Sun Valley event every year, which is dubbed the Mogul Camp. Literally, you know, the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, goes, many politicians, and big media deals happen at Sun Valley. And so I got to really see and meet the heads of Google, the heads of big Chinese companies, and again, see the media business developing from the top, not from a little leg of the stool. And, you know, I watched the development of the media business from just TV to technology. And so there was this kind of a battle that went on at the time between who was going to make out. Were the media companies going to beat the tech guys, or were the likes of Mark Zuckerberg and the Google guys and Tencent and all of these other Chinese properties, were they going to swallow the media? And I guess you guys know what happened, right? You know, we've got the media companies in crisis right now. I went to Cannes. There were barely any studios beyond Mission Impossible, which is a Paramount movie. We didn't really see the big studios there. They were not advertising. And what I did see was the growth of Nigerian film or Saudi film or Qatari film. And so, you know, we're witnessing a retreat of you know, the power of big American companies to set the agenda in a way that they absolutely did in the 80s. I don't know if anybody remembers the shift from the 3 broadcast networks to the 500 channel universe. Remember that? I don't know what kind of universe we're in right now, but it must be 5 trillion outlets. I write a newsletter on Substack. I get at least 100 Substacks in my email every day. We have proliferation of the content creator industry. We have folks who listen to news reports and then they go on their own Instagram or YouTube channels and they repeat what they heard and they get advertising from that. And so they're, you know, they're almost like parasites on the back of the elephant. When they get things wrong, they don't go back and correct, but they are siphoning money away from journalism. And that's something that concerns me. I'm sure Rupert is sitting in his office on 6th Avenue and saying, you know, how do we deal with this, or how do we get into this? And so, you know, that shift has been something incredible to watch. I'm sure you all get your news from multiple different sources. Some people tell me where you look. Where do you go for news? What are you listening to? Are you cross-referencing from different?
But Claire, we don't even know what to believe or who to listen to anymore.
This is very true. It's hard to know where to go, who to believe, what's real, and whether even the traditional media that I turn to, it's dubbed legacy media now because there's this whole other thing taken over on YouTube. And so, yeah, I'm a media journalist. I feel like I should know what's real and what's not and how to sift things. And it is increasingly difficult. So you wanted to share a thought.
As you know, Mr. Murdoch owns Fox News, and he is primarily responsible for the nastiness that he has created in America, in which lying is something that occurs every day, and he's introduced something that's really harmed American culture and our politics and our daily relations. How does he justify it? Does he take responsibility? Does the press in Britain hold him accountable? Because they certainly don't in America.
Well, I think that's a good question. I feel like I'm going to get to it a little bit later, if that's okay.
And you'll need to repeat it, okay?
We'll repeat the question and then we'll try and answer it. But, you know, what we've seen is polarization in the media, no doubt about it. I just filed a story about all of the folks leaving CNN and MSNBC who are going to their own YouTubes, their own newsletters. That's a big growth industry. Jim Acosta, who knows Jim Acosta from CNN? You know, he was, his time slot was moved from a prime time to a midnight slot, which meant that people wouldn't see him. He famously is a Trump antagonist. When he was in the White House, he was the White House correspondent, and he was banned because I don't know if anybody remembers the mic that he had, and the Trump person tried to take it off him, and he held on to it, and he was banned. And an amazing First Amendment lawyer called no, it was Theodore Boutros. He got him back his press pass. And so when Jim left CNN, I think there was a feeling that, oh my gosh, is this the start of a tidal wave of capitulation, is what I heard somebody say. And I think that is a great way of describing what feels like is going on right now. And so, you know, Jim Acosta, Midi Hassan, who was at MSNBC, who also left. He was a pretty controversial guy, and he now is setting up his own media business and seemingly doing well. And so what we had before, who remembers Glenn Beck on Fox News? You know, he obviously knew what rated and kind of moved from here very far over here to the point where I think even Fox, it was too much for Fox. And so he went off and launched The Blaze, which, you know, has been established for many years now. And then we saw Megyn Kelly, who was at Fox News, who went to NBC. Things didn't work out there. She launched her own podcast on Sirius. And now she's launched her own podcast platform for everybody who is interested in kind of being their own boss. And Ben Shapiro also made a big name for himself on Facebook and has a very successful YouTube channel. I think he has 8 million subscribers. So what we saw during the Biden administration was something that was very right of center. Folks got an audience. And so now that Trump is in power, what we're seeing is the other side of that. So that lots of people who would be classified as left-leaning voices are now making their own news, making their own businesses, and they seem to be flourishing, and there's absolutely an appetite for it. In some ways, the reason is people feel like they're not getting their red meat from regular television. How many people here feel like they're happy with the news they get on TV? No. Nobody. Tell me what your criticisms are. Like, do you feel like it's watered down, or do you feel like it's not accurate? Like, tell me what you think. Anybody? It's biased.
Ugly.
And it's ugly.
We're not getting news, we're getting opinion.
You're getting opinion, not news. Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, who has the time? I mean, back when we were younger, we watched it at 6 o'clock at night and then 9 o'clock at night, but we don't watch news. We don't get to get that news anymore, so we have to do it at our time.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah, that gentleman just said that, you know, folks used to watch the 6 o'clock news. People don't have time anymore. But I feel like we're spending an awful lot of time trying to put truth together ourselves. And that is really Not easy. Not easy. So back to Rupert. Where can I go with Rupert? Why is Rupert interesting?
Yeah.
Why is Rupert interesting to anybody in this room?
Do you think he really believes what he's selling, or do you think he's just selling it because it sells? I mean, do you think this deeply
Rupert is undoubtedly conservative and right-leaning, but what we've seen in many political cycles, Rupert absolutely loves politics, as anybody might know. I've been reading a lot about Australian politics, which I knew nothing about before. And, you know, what you see is Rupert backing unusual candidates. In the UK, some of his newspapers backed Keir Starmer, some of them didn't. In Australia, he will go from right to left. In the UK, he went from Margaret Thatcher to Tony Blair. In the US, you know, he was a big fan of Ronald Reagan. If you read the Wall Street Journal today, you would probably see a lot of negative stories about Trump's philosophy on Ukraine and his philosophy on tariffs. And so I think it's difficult to pigeonhole where Rupert is. The Rupert empire is huge, and there are many, many different voices with different opinions in every one of his outlets. We will get to Fox News in a little bit.
Claire, is that because it's wherever the money is whatever side he'll take at the time?
Rupert is a super savvy business person, and he is that way because when he started, things were really tough for him. So he's a youngster, he's in Adelaide, and you know, he is fighting for his life. He has to keep this business together that he's inherited from his father, and he is being attacked on all sides. So if you begin your career like that, when everyone's against you, you're going to be pretty savvy by the time you get to 94. So Rupert is a very, very smart businessman, and he is very ruthless, but he's very in touch with what the population think. And I think a lot of people would say, looking back, that if Kamala lost everybody, that we lost the House, the Senate. I remember there was a screen on CNN that night, and the reporter was asked, did she win anything that Biden won? And the screen was just black. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, these people were so out of touch with what Americans were thinking and feeling at the time that Fox News got it. They got what people wanted. Their audience is double what MSNBC and CNN is. What does that tell you about what Americans have an appetite for on television? What's that?
Lies. they don't really want to know the truth.
But also, don't you think that the number of people, as you just looked at, actually watching news on TV in the U.S. has gone down significantly? That it's very polarizing groups, and we do follow TV news. We were just saying we do not watch any TV news. We get our news now from the BBC while we've been here, France 24 in English.
Yes. I think a round of applause for that.
And we are from the U.S.
Yeah.
You know, and that obviously gives us our left-leaning tendencies as well. But I always feel like if you can see the U.S. news from a different perspective, like BBC, France 24, whatever, even every once in a while, Rod will go on Al Jazeera English. It's good to see the reflection of what's happening in our own country.
Yeah, I think that's a really good perspective, and it's one that when I'm here, I'm watching Al Jazeera English, I'm watching France 24, which is excellent. They have reporters around the world, which I love. They go to bureaus in Latin America, and I'm thinking, wow, like who can resource a bureau in Latin America these days? And then I saw a tweet about CBS News and their coverage of the golf, PGA golf. And it was about the fact that they had 125 cameras covering the golf. They had drone cameras. They had a guy in the sky looking down on the golf course. And I'm thinking,
why?
They were resources that used to go to news. CBS News used to have bureau all over the world. And because, I'll tell you why it's changed, I can help people understand why things are the way they are. Advertisers are going where they can buy a bulk of audience. And if it's cheaper to do that on Facebook or on Google or on YouTube or on a website, they can buy upscale people 18 to 49 who, have big homes or whatever. They can do that more cheaply than they can if they just buy, broadcast television. And so the other thing that's in their head is, why be part of this polarization when we can just support something that everybody likes?
Exactly. It's safe. Golf is safe.
But what ends up happening is that the news resources that we need to present, to uphold democracy and to really call people to account, not just on a national basis, but in our own towns, the mayors, the local councils, and, what's in the library, what's been taken away from the library, all of that ability to call politicians to account is being lost because newspapers are dying and they're not profitable. And so what we're seeing is this, I don't want to be like so depressing. I am part of a renaissance of media, which has moved to newsletters and YouTube videos and the such like. And it depends on subscribers and advertisers in the same way. But there's a lot more freedom. I don't know if anyone knows Steve Schmidt here. He's a Republican operative. He used to be on MSNBC all the time, giving like the right-wing view of what was happening on MSNBC, on Joe and Mika's show. And he has his own show now called The Warning, which I watch regularly. And he calls out bullshit all the time. And it's excellent. And it's exactly what you want to hear from the news anchors. But having worked at inside the machine, I have to tell you, there's when you report things that are controversial, you have to run the gamut of standards departments who are about fairness, and you have to run the gamut of lawyers who want to make sure you're not exposing the employers to big libel cases or legal. And so it's hard. I just want to tell you, journalism is really hard. And I wrote a big piece for Vanity Fair about CBS News and what was happening with 60 Minutes. And, their exec producer just left because of what he felt was constraints on what he could say. His boss just quit. The CBS News president just quit this week, arguing the same thing. And of course, the company has a merger that is going through the FCC, and Shari Redstone, the owner, is trying to get that deal done. At the same time, the FCC is saying, well, hang on, we're going to look at this Kamala interview that happened, and Trump has a lawsuit against CBS News, $20 billion. His argument was this was not edited in a way that was fair to me. We could go on that topic of who Trump is suing, but I do think it has this chilling effect on the media that we haven't seen in really my lifetime. I can't remember a time when so many news outlets and so many news personalities, and even Bruce Springsteen, everybody's under an investigation or a threat of an investigation. And, to bring us back to the movies at Cannes, that freedom to say what you think and to express yourself, and the rights of journalists to do their jobs. free of their legal departments telling them, hey, if we write this or we say this, we're going to have Trump on our back, and maybe, maybe we shouldn't do that. I just read a story in the Daily Beast about how Bob Iger had a chat with the ladies at The View, telling them to cool it on the tone of the politics that they do. So, I think that probably brings us to the end of this session. If anyone wants to ask me anything about how the media works or anything like that, I'm happy to chat.
Is Rupert losing a lot of money?
It depends which property you're talking about. He's got a lot of properties. I would say that newspapers is not a great business to be in right now, but that's not to say that the Wall Street Journal isn't popular, and the New York Post is popular, and the Sunday Times and the Times. Also the Australian in Australia. I think it's a harder fight to get people to advertise right now. And then, we didn't even talk about AI. We didn't even talk about the fact that the Chicago Sun-Times wrote a book review. It actually wasn't part of the paper. It was part of a special section, but the book review had books in it that were made up. The reporter had, well, I don't know if I should call him a reporter. I don't know if he was just a writer, a hired writer, but he'd used ChatGPT or one of those AI services to kind of surface some stuff. Didn't check it. It went in the paper. And even if it wasn't in the actual paper, it was a special section. But I mean, it damages credibility. And I always say, like, if in terms of like the use of AI for journalism, would you use a calculator that was wrong like 80% of the time or 20% of the time? You wouldn't, right? So this is a technology that's evolving, but it's going to evolve in a big way, and it's going to change journalism, and we're going to have AI written headlines and AI written summaries at the top of stories. And sir, please jump in.
So, boy, there's a lot going on here.
Oh, sorry.
There's one thing that I want to focus on, is that is the editors.
Yeah.
Right? Because going back in the day where we only had half an hour news at 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock, the editors decided what is going to be viewed.
Right.
And to me, that was the issue that with Fox News. Yes, I think Murdoch has actually got money in his eyes, but it was easy because I think the press was leaning possibly to the left on certain issues, but there was population in the United States in rural environments that totally didn't feel that they were being heard. And we have to think in the United States how Trump won the election.
Yes.
And not falling back into some of the ways that we used to think things would be, even with the media. Because I think some people really felt that they were not being heard, and I think it's the editors that decided what was going to be shown. And I can make arguments about there's certain groups within folks that I deal with that felt that we weren't being heard by the media too. So, and I'm thinking like with the editors, and so that's kind of what I'm getting to with my question, which is, do you think the editors have to rethink what they're actually choosing to report on because they felt that others are not reporting on it? Again, I'm an ally in the context that I believe.
No, it's a very, very good point. It's a very good point.
Yeah, but I think that it's just that some folks still feel that their voices are not being heard. Things are being slanted towards the left when the right might have valid arguments, and that Fox might be showing certain things that are true news that are not being shown on some of the left.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think so. The question was about editors and what they select and whether there's bias in what they select. And I think that journalists read each other, right? I read other journalists and I read what they say. And when you go to press conferences, you talk to each other, and everybody has an idea of what's right, what's wrong. And I think what we saw with the Joe Biden aging story is groupthink. What we saw is people accepting that he was okay. And I think if you watch TV, I didn't need any Biden aide to tell me that this was a person who was really struggling. You could see him struggling with stares. You could see him struggling with speech, even before that debate that ended his presidential run. And so I think, there is a problem. There is absolutely a problem in that there's an accepted way of doing things, an accepted way of thinking about things. And I think during COVID, what we saw exactly that, right? I remember reading about how the COVID escaped because of a bat in a wet market. And then, so I watch Fox News a lot, and I watch every channel a lot, and I try to form my own opinions as a reporter based on the left and the right and everything in between, and not just UK and not just US, but what do the French think, and try to, intellectualize what I'm seeing. And I remember thinking, hang on a minute, there is that university that's looking into COVID, or I forget what it was, zoonotics, is it? The study of like disease. And I thought, is it really so beyond the realm of possibility that something happened? And I think that's a question journalists should have asked, or should be asking, or should have. And we were told, no, that's absolutely wrong. And if you say that, it could be viewed as racist, and it could maybe create fervor or anxiety or anger towards different people. And so we're not going to talk about it. And I'm thinking, really? Yeah, we're not going to examine. I mean, even the COVID vaccine, I couldn't wait for it to come out. I wanted my shot so I could travel, and I totally was behind it. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, has anyone tested this? Who has it been tested on? Am I taking a risk? And I was prepared to take that risk. But I think that it was wrong for the media just to force everybody into this kind of, you got to accept it. We don't want to write about anybody who is dying or has all these other side effects, because as reporters, you should be examining everything. And anyway, I just, say that to kind of hear your point. And your point is,
they didn't and they couldn't.
Yeah.
They didn't and they couldn't.
I mean, I think of myself as independent politically, and I feel like I can see on both political teams control of the media and control of the message. And I think, the Biden administration, when they would call Mark Zuckerberg and say, don't promote this and don't do that, it was real. That is real pressure on and censorship in some ways on big technology companies, and preventing them from reporting on the Hunter Biden laptop that the New York Post wrote about, and they lost their Twitter account. So I think it's important to see, folks get angry when it's Trump, and then the other side gets angry when it's Biden, and everyone is just angry all the time. But I just want to tell you that there are things happening in political systems that do see folks working together. They're not stories because they're not interesting, because friction is interesting, and friction gets clicks. But when you sit down and think about it, there are positive ways that the parties are working together. Maybe not right in this moment, but I think it's important to remember that there's a lot of noise on the screen, and that Trump enjoys making headlines, and he does and says things to be in the news cycle because that's what he loves. And what is behind that, and how much of that actually becomes law or reality, how much gets rolled back, how much do the courts say you can't do that. And so, in the panic and anxiety of this moment, I think it's important to remember some good things are happening. I mean, I try to look at the silver lining, right? I mean, I think that Trump is pro-America. He is about... Okay, that's controversial. That's controversial.
He's pro-Trump.
Okay, I touched the third rail. Yeah, everybody's listening. All right. Okay, I think that probably concludes this part of the talk.
Okay, so hold on. Just